Between traditions that imprison and dreams that liberate, an unlikely connection is born. A young Muslim woman on the brink of a forced marriage and a Parisian artist torn between family expectations and his passion meet by chance. Two worlds collide on a journey where courage challenges boundaries, proving that some destinies are written beyond the pages. The sun was timidly rising over Istanbul, and Aylan Demir was already awake. Her slender fingers danced across the paper of the notebook carefully hidden under the mattress. The 23-year-old was precisely tracing the ornate letters of Arabic calligraphy, each curve and flourish carrying a bit of the dream she secretly nurtured. Freedom. The small room where she had slept since childhood was her refuge. The light blue walls embraced shelves full of books, many of them gifts from her mother, who pretended not to notice when Aylan stayed up late reading by the light of a small lamp. On mornings like that one, when the rest of the house was still asleep, she could be completely herself. "Aylan, breakfast is ready," Fatma's voice echoed down the hallway. Quickly, the young woman closed the notebook and hid it. She adjusted the scarf over her dark hair and descended the lightly creaking wooden stairs. The old house where she lived with her parents exuded the aroma of spices and freshly brewed Turkish coffee. Fatma, your mother, was in the kitchen. At 48 years old, she maintained a serene beauty in her almond-shaped eyes, although worry lines marked her forehead. She wore a colorful scarf and an apron over her traditional dress. "Good morning, Mother," Aylan smiled, kissing her mother's cheek. "Your father wants to talk to you after breakfast," Fatma commented, avoiding direct eye contact with her daughter. "It's important." Aylan's stomach tightened. She was well acquainted with that tone of voice. It was the same her mother had used when her aunt was forced to marry, years ago. She remembered how her aunt had withered in a loveless marriage until an illness took her prematurely. Kemal Demir entered the kitchen, tall and austere in his impeccable suit, despite it being an ordinary day. At 55, his gray hair and rigid posture commanded immediate respect. He was a man of few words and many rules. "Aylan, we need to talk in the living room," he said after finishing his coffee. The living room, with its Persian rugs and dark furniture, seemed smaller than ever. Aylan sat on the couch, her hands clasped in her lap, while her father stood, like a judge about to deliver a sentence. "Mehmet Kazan has asked for your hand in marriage," he announced without any preamble. "He is a respected man, owner of 3 shops in the bazaar. He has status. The wedding will be in 3 weeks. The world seemed to slow down around Aylan. Mehmet Kazan. The man was at least 45 years old. She had seen him a few times, always looking at her in a way that made her feel uncomfortable. "But father, I don't even know him well." Her voice came out lower than she intended. "You will know him after the marriage. That's how it should be." Kemal's tone admitted no discussion. "Your mother will start the preparations." That night, Aylan couldn't sleep. She opened her sketchbook and let tears fall onto the carefully worked pages. One of them showed the Eiffel Tower, drawn from a photo in a book. Paris. A distant dream that now seemed impossible. Thousands of kilometers away, in a stylish apartment overlooking the Seine, Julian Mora was finishing another sketch. The 29-year-old had talent in his hands. Each stroke revealed rare sensitivity and perception. His brown hair fell lightly over eyes focused on the paper. The studio where he worked was spacious, with large windows that flooded the space with natural light. On the walls, modern paintings mingled with portraits of ordinary people, a flower seller, a lady feeding pigeons, a street musician, people whom most didn't even notice but whom Julian transformed into art. The phone rang, interrupting his work. It was Henry, his father. "Julian, you missed the meeting with the investors again." The authoritative voice of Henry Mara rang from the other end of the line. "I told you I couldn't go, Dad. I'm preparing for my exhibition. This artist's game has lasted too long. The gallery needs someone who understands business, not scribbles." Julian closed his eyes, containing his frustration. Henry, at 58, was a successful businessman who never understood his son's passion for art. Since the death of Claire, his mother and only ally, the pressure to abandon drawing and take over the family gallery as a real business had intensified. After hanging up the phone, Julian walked to a small carved wooden chest. He opened it gently and took out an old sketchbook. On the first page, in delicate handwriting, it read, "What you draw with love never dies. With all my love, Claire." His mother had been a talented painter who gave up a promising career to marry Henry. She always encouraged her son's talent, hiding his drawing materials when his father insisted it was a waste of time. Even after her untimely death, Claire continued to be his inspiration and strength. Tomorrow he would board the train to a small town in southern France. He needed peace to finish some works for the exhibition. What he didn't imagine was that this trip would change everything. The decision came during the early hours of the morning. Eileen would not follow her aunt's path. She quickly gathered her savings, saved over years from giving private language lessons. It was little but enough for a ticket and a few days away. With trembling hands, she wrote a short note to her mother. "I need to find my own path. I'll return when I can. With love, Eileen." Next to it, she left the turquoise blue scarf her mother had given her on her 18th birthday, a sign that she was okay and would come back. The train station was almost deserted at that early hour. Eileen pulled a small suitcase, carrying only the essentials and, hidden among the clothes, her precious sketchbook. The train to Paris would depart in 20 minutes. Her heart was pounding as she bought the ticket, fearing that someone might recognize her. When she finally boarded, she chose a seat near the window in an almost empty car. She wore discreet clothes and a simple scarf covering her hair. As the train started moving, silent tears streamed down her face. It was the first time she left Istanbul, the first time she openly disobeyed her family. Julian boarded minutes before departure. He immediately noticed the young woman with the scarf looking out the window. There was something about her, perhaps the upright yet vulnerable posture, or the eyes reflecting a mix of fear and determination. As he always did when something touched him, he discreetly took out his sketchbook and began to draw. The hours passed, and the train cut through gradually changing landscapes. Mountains, plains, small villages. Eileen watched everything with fascination, even through the tears that occasionally blurred her vision. Julian, across the car, continued his drawing, capturing not only the physical features of the young woman but something deeper, that spark of courage that seemed to light up her eyes, even in sadness. Near the end of the journey, as the passengers prepared to disembark, Julian made an impulsive decision. He approached Eileen's seat, who looked at him surprised and a little apprehensive. "Sorry, but I needed to capture this moment. It's you," he said in English, extending the open notebook. Eileen looked at the drawing and was left speechless. It was her, but in a way she had never seen herself. The drawing captured not only her appearance but something she didn't even know she was showing hope. It's beautiful," she replied hesitantly in English. "But why me? Some faces tell stories that need to be heard," Julian smiled. "I'm Julian Morrow." "Eileen Demir," she replied, feeling strangely safe with this stranger. The train was arriving at the Paris station. "Are you familiar with Paris?" he asked, noticing her anxious expression. Eileen shook her head. "It's my first time. I can show you some places if you like, or at least help you find a safe hotel." At another time, Eileen would have immediately refused. A young Muslim woman should not accept the company of an unknown man. But she was in a new world, far from the restrictions of her previous life. And there was something in this stranger's eyes' sincerity, perhaps. "That would be very kind," she replied with a slight smile, the first in many days. The following days felt like a dream for Eileen. Paris was unveiled through Julian's eyes, not just the tourist landmarks, but also the small cafes where artists gathered, ancient bookstores hidden in narrow alleys, plazas where street musicians played melodies that spoke directly to the soul. In Montmartre, they drank hot chocolate while watching painters working outdoors. At the Louvre, Julian spoke passionately about the techniques and stories behind the masterpieces. He took her to a small gallery where budding artists displayed their works, showing her that art didn't need to be grand to be meaningful. "You see beauty where others do not," Eileen commented as they walked through the Luxembourg gardens, the autumn leaves creating a golden carpet under their feet. "And you carry courage where many only carry fear," he replied, noticing how she absorbed each new experience with bright eyes. Slowly, Eileen began to share her story. She spoke about her traditional family, the arranged marriage that awaited her, the fear of living a life without her own choices. She showed Julian her notebook of calligraphy and drawings, revealing a talent she had never been allowed to fully develop. Julian, in turn, spoke about his father's pressure to give up art, about the mother he lost too soon, and about the constant struggle to stay true to his heart while trying not to completely disappoint his family. On a rainy afternoon, sheltered in a small cafe, their hands accidentally touched while both reached for the sugar bowl. The touch, brief and innocent, sent an electric current through them both. Eileen quickly withdrew her hand, her cheeks flushed, but her eyes remained on Julian's. "I'm confused," she confessed softly. "In my entire life, I never thought I could feel this for someone so different from me." "Differences are just outer layers," Julian replied gently. "When I look at you, I see someone who understands what it is to fight to be authentic in a world that demands conformity." At that moment, something blossomed between them, a silent understanding that, against all odds, they had found something rare. Reality, however, was quick to impose itself. Henry Morrow discovered that his son was often in the company of a young foreign woman, Muslim, and without social connections. The information came from a friend who had seen them together at an exhibition. "This relationship will ruin our reputation," Henry said during a tense dinner in the family's luxurious apartment. "The Morrows have a position to maintain. It's not just about you, Julian. She is incredible, father, intelligent, talented, courageous." "She is unsuitable," Henry interrupted. "Think of the consequences. Think of the scandal." His father's words, though painful, did not surprise Julian. What he did not expect was what happened the next day. Eileen met him at the cafe where they used to meet, but her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. "Men from my community are in Paris," she said with a trembling voice. "My father sent them. They are spreading rumors about me, making threats. They said they will take me back by force if necessary." "I won't let them take you," Julian held her hands. "We can seek help. There are organizations." "It's not just that," she interrupted, tears streaming down. "I've heard they are investigating you too. They found out who your family is. They are threatening to create problems for your father for his business." Silence weighed between them. Julian knew well the value his father placed on the impeccable reputation of the Morrows. "Perhaps I've only brought trouble to you," Eileen finally said, pulling her hands away. "I need to leave. I cannot be the cause of your family's destruction." "Eileen, please. It's better this way." She stood up, wiping away her tears. "Thank you for showing me that there is a world where I can dream. That is more than I ever expected to have." Before Julian could stop her, Eileen quickly left the cafe, blending into the Parisian crowd. She left behind only the drawing he had made of her on the train, a memory of the moment their paths crossed. The months that followed were difficult for both of them. Eileen, back in Istanbul, faced her father's pent-up fury and her mother's silent sadness. To avoid further scandals, Kemal hastened the preparations for the wedding with Mehmet Kazan. Julian immersed himself in his work, drawing compulsively. Every portrait he made seemed to have something of Eileen, the same gaze, the same silent strength. Reluctantly, he began to participate more in the family business, seeking a compromise with his father, who seemed relieved at the end of that inconvenient episode. The day of Eileen's wedding arrived like an inevitable sentence. Dressed as a bride, in an elaborate white and gold gown, she observed her reflection in the mirror. The eyes staring back at her seemed to belong to someone else, empty, resigned. Fatma entered the room to adjust the veil. Seeing her daughter's expression, her eyes filled with tears. "My dear," she said softly, "you deserve happiness." "I'm doing what I need to do, Mother," Eileen replied, trying to smile, "to honor our family." Fatma adjusted the veil and then, surprisingly, pulled out a small package from her pocket. "Your father doesn't know about this," she whispered. "It's money I've saved, and your passport, if you decide, if you need." The words hung between them. Eileen looked at her mother with new understanding. Fatma had always been stronger than she seemed. "The guests are arriving," Fatma said, hugging her daughter. "Whatever your decision, know that I love you." When she was alone again, Eileen looked at the small package in her hands. She thought of Julian, the drawing he had made of her on the train, the way he saw beauty and possibilities in her. She thought of her aunt, wasting away in a loveless marriage. The decision crystallized in her heart with surprising clarity. Minutes later, to the shock of the guests gathering in the garden, the bride ran past, holding up the voluminous dress. Ignoring the cries of surprise, Eileen raced through the streets until she found a taxi. "To the train station, please," she said, her heart pounding. "As fast as possible." In Paris, Julian was preparing for the opening of his first major exhibition. After months of intense work, he had finally agreed to show his works at the family gallery. Henry, surprisingly, had given him total creative freedom, perhaps recognizing that his son would never be truly happy following an imposed path. The centerpiece of the exhibition was a large portrait Eileen on the train, looking out the window, with a mix of fear and hope in her eyes. Julian had simply titled the piece Courage. Elegant guests mingled in the gallery, critics murmured approval, champagne glasses clinked, but Julian barely noticed. Every time the door opened, he couldn't help but look, hoping for someone he knew would not come. It was then that a murmur rippled through the gallery. The guests turned, expressions of surprise on their refined faces. Among them, an unexpected figure was making her way. A young woman in a crumpled and dirty wedding dress, the veil hanging askew, her face marked by tears and determination. Eileen stopped in front of the large portrait, recognizing herself immediately. Tears flowed freely as she whispered, "You never stopped drawing me." Julian, who was observing the scene paralyzed, finally moved. He crossed the crowd, as if no one else was there. "And you never stopped being my inspiration," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. When they embraced in the middle of the gallery, the audience fell into absolute silence. It was not a chance meeting. It was destiny, purpose, the conclusion of something that had begun on that train months ago. Henry Morrow, watching the scene from a distance, saw something that reminded him of Claire, the same intensity, the same certainty that some connections are too rare to be ignored. In that moment, something changed in his hardened heart. 25 years later, the home of Eileen and Julian on the outskirts of Paris overflows with life and creativity. On the walls, paintings and calligraphy blend together, telling the story of two cultures that met and enriched each other mutually. In the spacious living room, the original drawing made on the train holds a place of honor, alongside family photos, 3 now-adult children, gatherings with both families, precious moments captured over the years. Kemal Demir, now an elderly man with white hair, sits on the porch with Henry Morrow. The two men, once so firm in their convictions, have been transformed by the love they have witnessed. "I thought I had lost a daughter," comments Kemal, watching Eileen teaching Arabic calligraphy to their granddaughter. "But I gained an honorable son-in-law and a larger family." Henry nods, contemplative. "They taught us that love is stronger than reputation, tradition, or fear." In the kitchen, Eileen and Julian prepare tea for everyone. Their hair already shows silver strands, but their eyes retain the sparkle of their first meeting. "Do you know what people always ask me?" says Eileen, smiling. "How I had the courage to run away dressed as a bride." "And what do you say?" asks Julian, embracing her from behind. "That I wasn't running away, I was running toward my destiny. That God was leading me to the true altar of life, where love and faith unite." Outside, the sun sets over Paris, painting the sky with the same hues Julian uses in his paintings. The same golden light bathes Istanbul, where it all began. Two cities, two cultures, united by the extraordinary journey of hearts that refuse to accept borders as endings. When everyone gathers for dinner, there is laughter, stories, and the profound certainty that true love not only endures, it transforms, heals, and builds bridges where there were once walls.